Nearly 20 million people in the United States are currently in the path of Hurricane Milton. Its effects are already being felt. Parts of the Tampa Bay area are going to lose access to running water starting today. Gas stations are running out of fuel as evacuees fill up their cars and try to flee. Those riding out the storm are stocking up to power their generators. Let's get straight to CNN meteorologist Chad Myers in on hurricane headquarters. Chad, it doesn't sound like this new forecast is what we wanted.
It is not. It is. We saw all day, and I talked to you about this at 4 o'clock this afternoon, that the last plane left about 3 hours ago at 1:55. There hadn't been a new plane in it yet, but now the satellite presentation is even better than it was at 1:55, so the Hurricane Center went to 1:65. There is a plane on the way, should arrive probably within the hour, but still, it doesn't matter. 1:65 here, and still very close. Now, I heard you say double in size. That doesn't mean double in speed. It means double in size of how big this thing is. So when it does get to Florida, it's going to impact a larger area. So still likely a Category 3 making landfall, losing some steam here for a while as it makes its way. And probably somewhere around 35, 36 hours from now is when this thing actually makes landfall. And people ask all day, where's it going to hit? It's going to hit everywhere. Look at this, is the size of the Category 3 or higher wind speeds all the way from well north of Tampa all the way south of Fort Myers. And then the rest of the state gets hurricane force. There's your hurricane force ball all the way across to the east side. So Daytona, Orlando, you're all going to see power outages. You're all going to see wind gusts likely between 90 and 100 miles per hour. But then the surge, this is what all the mayors are talking about. Get away from this surge. The surge from Helene was 6 feet, 7 feet. This is going to be 15. So if you got wet at all in Helene, you're going to get overtopped in this storm. And then it's going to rain. And there are going to be places across the Florida Peninsula that could get 10 inches of rainfall and make flash flooding when it comes to the rain event, the freshwater flooding, not the saltwater flooding. So here it comes. It is going to come right into the Tampa Bay area. Now, the latest advisory, the latest forecast, has nudged a little bit farther to the south than it was, but all the way from Port Richey all the way down to basically almost Naples. You're still very close to the cone. You cannot take your eyes off this because they do wobble, and when they wobble, they catch people by surprise. Please do not be caught by surprise. We got this rapid intensification 2 days before it's going to hit. Please pay attention, because when they rapidly intensify 6 hours before they hit, that's when you get really caught off guard. Jake.
All right, Chad Myers, thank you so much. CNN's Isabel Rosales is in Tampa, directly in the path of a hurricane. And Isabel, the storm surge from this hurricane could smash the record, which was set by Helene less than 2 weeks ago. How is the city preparing?
By being extremely blunt. When we heard Tampa's mayor, Jane Castor, telling people, if you decide to stay in an evacuation zone, that's a mandatory evacuation zone, against what we're asking you to do, you're going to die. I worked here, I lived here for several years in the Tampa Bay area. I have never heard such blunt language from Tampa's mayor ever before, and I've covered many storms. They're telling people to get out. Please heed our warnings. Debris, that's also a huge concern. Getting it out of the neighborhoods. You're looking at gusts up to 115 miles per hour here in Tampa. Those are become flying projectiles, extremely dangerous. But then you have Tampa General Hospital, where I'm at right now, Davis Islands, that's a neighborhood of Tampa. This is the region's only level 1 trauma center. They cannot evacuate. They're too big, too specialized. The patients that they have are too sick. So what do? They put millions of dollars in tools like this. This is the Aquafence that they have bolted down to the ground. It can withstand storm surge in different parts, different heights, up to 15 feet high. We're anticipating 10 to 15 feet here in the Tampa Bay. But look at this. This is why it's so serious. They're on a man-made island. Look at this. I could throw a rock right over to the Hillsborough Bay. This is the first time this season by Helene that the Aquafence has been tested, and waters did reach right up there. It withstood it. It kept the hospital dry. It kept their patients, their staff safe. They're hoping, if it comes to this, that it'll do it again. Jake.
Both physically and emotionally, they were already picking up the pieces on Florida's Gulf Coast.
It's like hysterical, can't sleep, can't eat 1 minute, and then flying the next, and then you're like, it is what it is. You got to keep living.
Now, Beth Caldwell must cut short her search for her mother's wedding ring to evacuate for the second time in as many weeks.
You were saying you're really worried about folks who made it through this one but may not.
Well, yeah, because of the amount of debris on this street and the winds, even if it slows down.
Governor DeSantis said this morning that even with 24/7 debris removal, they wouldn't have all of Helene's damage cleaned up in time for Milton to make landfall. And this is why. There is one front loader over here waiting to fill up a line of empty dump trucks that's approximately 2 miles long. And this beach was covered in millions of dollars of fresh sand to try to protect this community, which just got washed away.
That's right.
What does that tell you about how we prepare and how we have to adjust to this new Earth?
The fact is you cannot adapt your way out of the climate crisis.
Susan Glickman grew up around this bungalow where her husband and a dear 90-year-old friend called Nanny survived Helene. But ironically, she's also a community climate organizer in Florida, desperately trying to convince officials and neighbors that this is what scientists have been warning about for generations.
It is beyond criminal if we do not dramatically address the root cause of the problem immediately. But if we keep putting climate pollution and burning fossil fuels, we're just going to make a lot of this planet in general just unlivable.
We are at the municipal marina here in St. Petersburg. A lot of boats there. Obviously, folks didn't have the means or the time to get them out, whereas the St. Petersburg Yacht Club, all those boats are gone. Jake, here's the water line from Helene less than 2 weeks ago, that scorch mark on the side. The predictions now are twice as high as that. So a lot of the businesses, hotels, residents here worried about that storm surge, also worried about the construction cranes. There's so many of them in this booming community. Officials say today they worry the winds could bring those down. They'll be so strong, but it's too late to try to disassemble them before Milton arrives. Jake?
All right, Bill Weir in St. Petersburg, please stay safe. Joining us now, Michael Brennan. He's the director of the National Hurricane Center. Michael, what is your biggest takeaway as the storm moves in?
That there are going to be multiple life-threatening hazards that are going to start playing out across much of Florida tomorrow, Jake. First, we're going to start with that life-threatening storm surge inundation. Everywhere you see in this dark purple here, much of the west coast of Florida, from south of Fort Myers, Naples, Cape Coral, up through Charlotte Harbor, Tampa, up to near Cedar Key, under a storm surge warning, meaning the life-threatening inundation is coming, associated with Milton as its center approaches the coast of Florida tomorrow night in the early morning hours on Thursday. And we're especially concerned about this area here from just north of Tampa, say Pinellas County, Hillsborough, Manatee, Sarasota. This purple area here, someone in here is going to see 10 to 15 feet of inundation above ground level, likely near and just to the right of wherever the center of Milton crosses the coast. But Milton's wind field is going to be so big that even farther south, hundreds of miles south, down to Naples, there's going to be the potential for life-threatening inundation from surge. And then we're going to have the wind field from Milton extend across much of the central portion of the Florida Peninsula, bringing hurricane force conditions to places like Orlando, Melbourne, Tampa, up to even closer to Jacksonville.
And as Milton approaches, it's going to double in size, impacting a larger area?
Yeah, we're expecting to see the tropical storm and hurricane force wind field of Milton basically double in size from what it is now. And you can see this huge red area. We have hurricane warnings in effect all the way from Cape Coral, Port St. Lucie, up through Melbourne, Orlando, almost to Gainesville, St. Augustine. Everywhere in here is at risk of seeing those hurricane conditions, widespread power outages, structural damage, tree damage, with the expectation of a major hurricane landfall somewhere here on the west central Florida coast, bringing devastating impacts from wind to that region.
This looks as though it will be the worst storm to hit Tampa in a century. Just how catastrophic might this hurricane be?
Well, it certainly has that potential. It's all going to come down to exactly where the center crosses the coast. If we have the center across the coast near or just north of the Tampa Bay region, that's where we're going to see that 10 to 15 feet of storm surge pushing all the way up into Tampa Bay. They haven't experienced anything like that in anyone's living memory. If the track is a little farther south, that highest storm surge may be shifted south down to places like Manatee County or Sarasota or even closer to Port Charlotte. So we don't know, and we're not going to be able to know within just a few hours of landfall exactly where those worst conditions are going to occur. That's why we're painting that broad risk, and that's why people are getting out across that region.
Let's bring in Democratic Congresswoman Kathy Castor. She represents much of the Tampa-Clearwater area, which is directly in the path of the storm. Congresswoman, thanks for joining us. So forecasters are talking about this hurricane in rather unprecedented terms. What are you hearing from people in your congressional district?
Jake, we are reeling. We're reeling from Hurricane Helene less than 2 weeks ago, and we are bracing for this monster Hurricane Milton. Helene was the most significant storm surge in a century. It flooded out thousands of my neighbors. They have their lives out on the street, and they were just beginning to grapple with what comes next. And then this storm intensifies so rapidly. This is just very serious. And fortunately, I think most are heeding the evacuation, but not everyone. I hope the word goes out. They've got to get out now.
Before you were elected to Congress, you served on the Hillsborough County Board of Commissioners, and we mentioned the water shutoffs being done to prevent damage to the infrastructure after the storm hits. What else do you think needs to be done on the county level, the local level, before this storm makes landfall beyond evacuating people as much as possible?
I think our local partners have done everything that they should be doing. Mayor Jane Castor and Mayor Ken Welch of St. Petersburg all of the local partners have been outstanding. The fire rescue and the police department and the Coast Guard just went through thousands of water rescues. So folks understand how dangerous this is going to be, because they say the surge is going to be higher than Hurricane Helene. The partnership at the federal, state, and local level, notwithstanding all of this misinformation, has been exemplary.
I want to talk about the misinformation in a second, but before we do, President Biden is pushing Congress to approve more hurricane relief aid. The Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, so far is resisting calls to bring Congress back before Election Day. Here's how Speaker Johnson explained it. Take a listen.
We'll be back in session immediately after the election. That's 30 days from now. The thing about these hurricanes and disasters of this magnitude is that it takes a while to calculate the actual damages, and the states are going to need some time to do that.
Do you think Congress needs to come back to D.C. sooner to get this aid passed?
FEMA has all of the resources that it needs to handle the disaster before us. The Coast Guard is out there prepared. We see the National Hurricane Center, thank goodness, doing its job. What is missing is that the Republicans refused President Biden's request for additional disaster aid for the long-term recovery and replenishment of the Disaster Recovery Fund. I hope as soon as the election is over that we get back and work in a bipartisan way to get that done.
Earlier today, President Biden talked about this danger of misinformation, which you were just referring to a second ago. Let's play a little bit of that.
But it misleads people. It puts people in circumstances where they panic, where they really, really, really worry. They think now they're not being taken care of. And it really is, it's going to sound, use an old phrase, it's un-American. It really is. People are scared to death. People know their lives are at stake. All that they've worked for, all that they own, all that they value.
So you're on the ground there. What is the impact of the misinformation? What are you hearing from your constituents as everyone should be focused on preparing for Milton?
Yeah, it's very irresponsible to prey on people's fears in the middle of a disaster. What I have seen over the past week are FEMA adjusters out on the street getting that aid into people's bank accounts. They need it to pay for a hotel, for diapers, for a baby formula, and for folks to spread misinformation that is not going to be there is disgraceful, frankly. But folks do not want these partisan games right now. They don't care if you have a D or an R. They want to know, are you keeping them safe? Or are you going to be there? Is FEMA going to have the water, the tarps, the meals necessary? Is the Coast Guard going to be able to function? And the answer to all of those questions are yes.
You've seen quite a few storms pass through Florida over the years. Where do you think Hurricane Milton ranks right now in terms of hurricanes you've been warned about?
Jake, this will be the biggest catastrophe in the state of Florida ever because it's a double whammy on the heels of Helene. Helene was a surge without much rain, without much wind, but Milton is a monster. We're going to have flash flooding. We're going to have roofs ripped off, and the National Hurricane Center says many of the areas will be uninhabitable after this. The climate crisis, it's not just about the weather, though, it's about your wallet. And what it is doing, it is imperiling our way of life here in Florida, making it so expensive that we're really grappling with how to move forward after this. I think it's going to be an incredible setback for this community. But we're resilient, and we will band together to do better and to rebuild in a more resilient way.
Congresswoman, where are you going to ride out the storm?
I'm getting out of the evacuation zone. All of my neighbors, just like all across the Tampa Bay area, banded together to board up houses. We checked on our older neighbors, and we are out of this evacuation zone. We'll be nearby, but that is the message. Anyone who thinks that they're going to be able to ride this one out, you're wrong. It's very dangerous. You need to safeguard yourself. Take your valuables now, and there's still a time to get out, but the window is rapidly closing.
All right, Congresswoman Kathy Castor, thank you so much.
Let's get back to our top story. Hurricane Milton tearing across the Gulf of Mexico right now as it takes direct aim at Florida's west coast. CNN's Boris Sanchez is joining us right now. He's live from Treasure Island in Florida, just outside Tampa and St. Petersburg. Give us the latest, Boris.
Wolf, this area is going to be remade by Hurricane Milton, at least according to the forecast, in large part because this area has already been weathered by Hurricane Helene up to 2 weeks ago. And that's why you see these giant piles of trash strewn across this area. Block by block by block of Treasure Island has about 6-foot piles of trash. One of the first things I noticed walking into this area was the smell, because this stuff has been sitting out. This is actually a boarded up beachfront property, the Page Terrace Hotel, and you can see the damage that Helene left behind. There's stuff like chairs, tables, I've seen appliances, dishwashers, a water heater. You don't want that stuff, especially some of the construction equipment. There's cinder blocks as well and sheet metal. You don't want that stuff flying at your head at roughly 125 miles an hour, which is what forecasters are projecting will happen once Hurricane Milton makes landfall here. Add to that a nearly 15-foot storm surge, plus about a foot of rainfall on top of that. And Wolf, I want to show you the giant pile of trash that is just opposite of City Hall. That thing is about 20 feet high. You could probably see it from our CNN Air drone right now. Imagine what it would be like to be in this neighborhood once the hurricane hits. That's why officials are putting out the word that residents in this area need to get out. They've actually been blasting a siren through the neighborhood. I want you to listen to exactly what that is like.
Emergency currently exists. Quickly secure your home or business and safely evacuate the area. Listen to local media and authorities for additional information.
And we are actually getting alerts right now on our devices. Mandatory evacuation zones are in effect for this area. At 7 p.m., access to Treasure Island will be cut off, Wolf. And soon after that, we'll have to see how this hurricane will remake the landscape here, as with so many other areas along Florida's Gulf Coast.
All right, Boris Sanchez, as I always say to our reporters in war zones, I'll say to you right now, stay safe over there. We'll try to stay in close touch with you, Boris Sanchez, reporting. Thank you very much. Right now, I want to continue this conversation. Joining us, Mayor Liz Albert of Sarasota, Florida. She's right in the middle of things as well. Your city is rushing, Mayor, to clear as much of this debris from Hurricane Helene as possible. How much progress have you made on this front, and what damage do you fear the remaining debris potentially could do?
Well, we've gotten a lot of it cleared. We've concentrated first on our barrier islands because that's where the worst of the storm surge will be. But as of 2 o'clock today, we had to stop. So anything that is still left, we aren't going to be able to get to. And I think it's going to be very dangerous. That's why we worked so hard to try to get as much of it hauled away before the storm as possibly that we could.
Your city, Mayor Sarasota, is expecting up to 15 feet in storm surge and up to 110-mile-an-hour winds from Hurricane Milton. How destructive do you see this being for your community so soon after Hurricane Helene?
After seeing what Hurricane Helene did with just a 6-foot surge and not the high winds that Milton will have, I really worry that this is going to be terribly destructive and that we're going to have to rebuild an awful lot of Sarasota.
Yeah, it's so sad to even think about the millions of people who are going to be impacted by this hurricane. The Sarasota commissioner, as you know, had a very stark warning to all the residents ignoring mandatory evacuation orders, saying, and I'm quoting now, "Get a Sharpie and write your name on your arm, at least so we can identify your body after." Is everyone listening to that, or are some people still in harm's way?
After what they experienced just a couple of weeks ago, people are listening this time. I don't see people talking about having a hurricane party or I'm going to ride it out. I haven't seen any of that. I think people are truly worried and are getting out where they can.
Well, good luck to you. Good luck to all the folks in Sarasota. The Sarasota Mayor, Liz Albert, thanks very much for joining us.
Tonight in tears, this viral video shows longtime Florida meteorologist John Morales, who's my guest in just a moment, breaking down on television. He was telling his viewers about the stunning severity of Hurricane Milton.
Just an incredible, incredible, incredible hurricane. It has dropped It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific.
Morales became emotional, as you could see, trying to gather his thoughts and his emotions so he could continue. He's out front now. He is the longest serving meteorologist in South Florida, a reassuring presence for 3 decades. And John, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you. 40 years as a meteorologist, 30 of them spent being the calm face for so many communities in South Florida. And those millibars that you're referring to in that clip are, how you measure the drop in air pressure that you've seen in this unprecedented storm. Obviously, when you started your sentence in that moment, I'm sure you didn't know exactly what was going to happen, that you would be sort of overwhelmed. What moved you?
It just so happens that moments before going on the air, the National Hurricane Center issued an urgent bulletin indicating that it had become a Category 5. So that was right at the moment. I remember I wasn't even looking at the camera as they were tossing, as the anchor was tossing to me. I was looking at my computer, my eyes go wide. And then I look at the pressure that they reported from the National Hurricane Center. And I did quick math. I also had a chart in front of me. And it's a very geeky, nerdy moment to break down over, 50 millibars in 10 hours. But to a meteorologist, it means something. It means extreme, rapid intensification of a hurricane, as would be expected in this new era that we're in. And it was just a confirmation of everything we've been talking about for so many years happening yet again, about to impact so many people, wreck so many lives. So it was just a mixture of empathy for those people, as well as the angst of increasingly frequent and more severe extreme weather events, and just frustration over being a climate communicator for over 20 years and realizing, this is happening and we knew it was coming.
And I guess when you talk about the angst, the frustration, the empathy, I mean, you have been that face, that presence, that calming presence that we turn to. That's what, when you turn on the TV and you wait for the weather, that's what that gives all of us. Every terrible storm, you've been there as that calming presence. Hurricane Andrew back in 1992, Katrina, Wilma, Irene, Matthew, Irma, the list goes on. They are all parts of your career. So what does stand out to you about this particular storm? In that moment when you're moved by, oh my, I cannot believe that we're in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest with you. I think this has been building up for a couple or maybe 5 years. You know, I've always been known as the non-alarmist, just the facts meteorologist, and the South Florida audience and the Miami Fort Lauderdale media market have appreciated that, coming from a market where weather is often overhyped, right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of the antithesis of that. So this is definitely a departure of the guy I've always been, but I have changed. The extreme weather events that are multiplying, the number of multi-billion-dollar disasters that are impacting this country and countries all over the world, it has changed me. These symptoms of the changing climate have changed me from a cool cucumber to somebody that's certainly more agitated and in a bit of dismay about what's going on.
So when you talk about climate change, John, and you're talking about how it has changed you, I want to play a little bit more of the moment you became emotional. That's when you were talking about climate change specifically. Let me play it.
You know what's driving that. I don't need to tell you. Global warming, climate change, leading to this and becoming an increasing threat for the Yucatan, including Mérida and Progreso and other areas there.
You know, we can hear your voice there still with the emotion wavering. What scares you the most, John, about the situation that we're in now with these storms?
Well, so that clip goes on to me saying that if you've ever traveled to the Yucatan Peninsula, while there are cities like Mérida and Cancun that, you know, have normal infrastructure and whatnot, there's also very, very humble communities all over the place. And that's what was making my voice break yet again, because it is more often than not, it is these humble communities in the United States, the frontline communities of color in the United States, and all over the world in countries that had nothing to do with the injection of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, okay, that are suffering the worst consequences of this. And that's where the empathy part came in. So I was just heartbroken by that. And that's what climate change can do. It impacts disproportionately people in frontline communities that really have very little to do with burning fossil fuels.
All right. Well, John, I appreciate your time, and I know you will be in Florida covering this storm, providing the comfort for so many in the state over these next days. And appreciate so much your taking a brief moment to speak with us.
Thank you, Erin.
All right.